You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. I started to notice that when something would cause me a little bit of anxiety and I'd be like, oh, okay. I try to just stay in a place where I'm like, this is happening. I can feel my heart racing a little bit. This is uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to take a couple breaths and I'm going to just see if this changes. And sure enough, things would start to change a little bit faster. When you're dealing with this on an everyday basis, it is so lonely, and it is really hard for the people who are closest to you to be full of compassion and to understand. Hi there, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm so delighted to be back here. It's been just a little while since I was on a little vacation last week, which I'll be sure to share about. But first, you guys know that I usually save any announcements or kind of promos until the end of the episode, but I'm going to switch things up a little bit because I have a favor to ask of you. Could you please, if you're listening to this and you have not had a chance to leave me a review yet, could you please go to wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, and leave a review about this podcast. Reviews are really the way that you can get your podcast noticed by others, and especially platforms who do share like new and noteworthy podcasts or podcasts that haven't had a chance to kind of be seen by the public, the rest of the public, outside of the podcaster's inner circle. And so you taking a couple minutes to write a couple thoughts down about how much you love tuning into this podcast would mean the world to me and allow me to help reach a lot of other people, which is kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. Is I just want to normalize all of the stuff that we're going through and be that voice that, you turn on when you're either driving or cleaning or working on something, and you just feel like you're there with a friend when maybe you don't have somebody actually there with you. And I will say, you guys, I meant to look before I started podcasting, but I think I'm coming up on a year in April of starting this podcast. I had a couple episodes that went straight to the Patreon because I wasn't quite sure of how to release on Apple Podcasts or like other podcasting sites. And I've learned a lot over the past year. But I was just sharing this with Dave over the weekend. I'm like, there's just such a vulnerability with any kind of endeavor like this. Like when you start a business or you started a side project or a hobby, it is really hard because the people that become the people that you market to. And those people aren't always your target audience, right? And so it really can get hard to break out of that. And, as a millennial, I feel like a lot of other millennials joke about how like all of the one kind of girls from high school who become like in MLMs or they're selling makeup or skincare or Pampered Chef or whatever else. I think that so many of us, it's interesting because, and maybe there's something astrologically too. I feel like our generation, either out of necessity or something inside of us, there's a hustler mentality. There's a sense of we need more, we can offer more, we can do more. And yet it is this really deep internal endeavor because it requires you putting yourself out there. And there's ways that you can do it, easier than others. And it takes time. I know that from starting my photography business, now, oh gosh, how many years in are we? I think this is our 7th year in business. Like 7 years in, we're in a much different place. And I've gone through enough of like the beginning stage growing pains to kind of feel like I have a little bit more of my footing, to kind of feel like I don't get as tripped up over certain inquiries, or I know better places to actually market myself, to actually get customers. But, for me with A Bit From Within, this has been way more challenging. I have to think of it in a totally different way. I'm trying to get it into the hands of the right people who actually care and who actually could benefit from sharing vulnerability, talking about self-care, who appreciate just whatever perspective that I have to offer. Okay, so I'm going to hit the brakes right there because I know if I keep on that mental topic that I'm going to stay there, and it's not even that. That's not why you're listening. I know that. So, quick update. We just had a really snowy, huge snowstorm that came through Denver, where I live, and I have to say it was just so different to appreciate this as an adult. Like the last huge snowstorm that I can remember was back in 2007. And the only reason I remember this is because I was in theater and film school at the time. And so I was really into like making little documentaries. And so I had filmed my family during this being snowed in. I like filmed this Scrabble game that my mom and my dad and I had played. I filmed my sister building these snow tunnels with the neighbor, and I very clearly can like picture the DVD in my head that said 2007 on it. And apparently there was an even bigger one in 2003, which I can't remember that one very well. I assume that it probably happened during a spring break, which happened. The only time that big snowstorms ever happened is when it didn't cancel school, at least back when I was in school. So being an adult navigating this big of a snowstorm was really interesting. So I guess like backing up just a little bit more. So Dave and I went out on our epic whirlwind of a road trip, and it was so much fun. I am so glad that we did it, especially with us both being fully self-employed, like doing our business. Now we don't have somebody else's schedule to kind of dictate when we can go out and adventure, as long as it doesn't, bump into stuff we have going on here with different clients. But we got to just go be in the car, see all these amazing sights, drive all over Utah, basically. That ended up kind of being the main state that we navigated. And I will say we learned a lot. I definitely think that in the future we will plan more time between locations, but we kind of looked at this as like a little bit of our own like little helicopter tour over places we've never been before, and like figuring out, okay, this is a taste of this spot. Where do we want to come back and spend more time? Like, what did we end up loving? And so because of that, we stayed like one night in Moab, one night in Zion, one night in Page, Arizona, where there was Horseshoe Bend. And because of just like we'd like hike and then drive and then hike and then drive and then hike and then drive. And there was some sleeping in between there too. But it was a lot. It definitely was kind of more mentally taxing than I thought it was going to be. Just, I think, being in the car that much. And we had some kind of change of plans towards the end of our trip, which we kind of had to accommodate for. And by the time we were finally getting home, it was like, there's this huge storm coming. So we're like, well, we really need to make sure that we get home before this kind of impacts. And we had first heard rumblings of this on like Tuesday, and then Wednesday there was more talk. And then of course, Thursday, there was a lot more talk, and then it was supposed to start Friday. Well, then we finally got home before Friday. Friday, it didn't happen. Nothing happened. And so then Saturday, I had rescheduled an engagement session for Saturday. I had picked a backup date for Sunday, not knowing what was going to happen. And then Saturday, like nothing happened. And I found myself sitting at home, watching outside, and noticing this like anxiety bubbling up inside of me. And I was really trying to put my finger on why. Like, why does it matter so much if it snows or not? And I think it just comes to an expectations thing. Like, the whole state had prepared us for this huge snowpocalypse snowstorm. Everyone had made different plans, and I just kind of got it in my head that it was going to be that way. And I think I was also kind of confronted with, what if nothing happens? And for some reason, this really bothered me. Maybe this was like control issues that should have manifested other places, like maybe during my road trip that got like scrambled up with this. And this was like an outlet that was pretty harmless that I could feel this way about. I don't know if that even makes sense. But I was just feeling like nothing's going to happen. Like, this is it. We're going to get a couple inches, a little dusting, and all of this accommodation, all of these expectations for being snowed in are not going to be worth it or proven or whatever. And then, of course, there's been so many hilarious memes about all of this. It's like Coloradans are doubting the snow, and the snow is taking it personally because yesterday we definitely got hit with that snowstorm. And the last report I saw, like the official report where we live, was like 26 inches. And of course, like there you go. That's Colorado weather, right? They said it was a very slow moving storm, so it's not surprising that it ended up mostly showing up on Sunday. But now it's also like kind of started this week out with a really funky vibe too, because they kind of made it seem like it was going to be mostly Saturday into Sunday, and then by Monday, hopefully things could be starting to get back to normal. And while we do have blue skies out right now, it does not feel like normal. Definitely not. I mean, I don't know how we are going to get out of our house if we need to right now. I mean, obviously we can dig our way out, but all of that is just to say it was kind of a strange weekend to kind of be greeted with this idea of like, we have to prepare for this big snowstorm, and then going through the snowstorm and all of the unknowns. Maybe part of the reason I was also kind of anxious is just knowing what happened in Texas last month and how difficult that was. Part of me was worried about any power outages here. Like, maybe it's just going to keep on this 2020 track of like, things are just shit. So like, I think part of me was like, what is the worst case scenario here? And like, are we prepared? Is everything going to be okay? How is this going to affect the rest of the week? And it just stirred some stuff up inside of me. I think there's just, again, I think it just goes back to like, there's so much that we can't control. And, you know, control is an illusion. I totally know that on a head level, and sometimes on a heart level, but on a gut level, I think sometimes I haven't fully processed that lesson. I mean, in different areas of my life. It's funny because I was just talking to a friend yesterday who's getting ready to go on her own road trip through Utah, and so we were kind of comparing notes and things. And, you know, she had mentioned to me a couple times, like, it is very important to me, like, that I plan my trips to the minute. Like, I like things to be detailed. I want to know exactly how long things are going to take. I want to have a plan. And gosh, I admire that, because if I would have put more effort into even our little road trip, like, maybe it could have been more spectacular. But there's an area of my life that I've been really having to practice, and that is in surrendering. And the easiest way that I've found like an entry point to practice this is around things like road trips or, you know, big things like that. You know, part of what I've realized about myself is that trying to take that on the way that I would want to, the way that I would feel is good, is too much for me. With everything else I have going on. Maybe if I had nothing going on in my life, I could plan the most epic trip ever. But I obsess way too much about like what is the right decision, that it's better for me to kind of go and just see what's going to happen. So that was one of our things with our road trip, because we planned it so spontaneously. Dave and I kind of split up the duties around, like, I was like, okay, I'll figure out where we're going to stay, but you have to figure out like what's open, what the park fees are, what the good hikes are. Like, you have to figure that part out. And there's, you know, like, Dave is awesome, and he did a great job of making sure that we had those details taken care of. But he definitely figured it out in a casual kind of way. You know, there was some stuff that we figured out like on the way to the location, which honestly worked out pretty well. There was a couple spots where like things needed like a 3-month out reservation, which we couldn't have gotten anyway with how spontaneous we planned our trip and how last minute. But I think what that did for me is just allow me to practice surrendering, practice being like, okay, like we are here. And I was able to frame it in my mind in the sense of like, this was a last minute trip. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can come back later to places we really loved and do the things that we wish we could have done this trip. And so I think having those lowered expectations really, really helped me. And this brings up this thing I remember is like back when I was dating, I used to always like, if I was going to go out on a date, I would always just wear something that was very generic for me, that I wore all the time, that I was super comfortable and that was not fancy at all. And I feel like this kind of falls into the same mindset around like, I'm just going to show up with what I know I have, what I know works, and that helps take the pressure off. I guess alleviating pressure is a really big thing for me, because I do feel like when you put too much pressure on a thing or on yourself, it just doesn't turn out as well. And I, when it comes to the trip, I really didn't want that. I wanted to be able to go and enjoy it for exactly what it was, and be able to hit my own reset button and be able to experience some sunrise hikes and just get out and breathe some fresh air. And we did that. We also spent a lot of time breathing car air, but that's totally okay too. We had such a good time in the car. We listened to an audiobook together, and we just had lots of conversation and stopped a lot and just had a lot of fun. But it definitely was like the snowstorm was a continued almost vacation, because it kind of felt like we got home to more of a slowdown. Like the things that we wanted to do or have scheduled didn't exactly happen that way. So we'll have to continue to regroup and find our footing and just keep moving forward. I feel like that is the theme that I have been so clearly bumping into with 2021 is like, yeah, you want to go, but the light is still red. That's how I feel. Is like I have all of this momentum of like, I can see it, I can feel it, I want to experience it, but all of the universe is still putting up like red lights or blockages for now. That's just like still in this waiting period. And I know it'll change. I definitely know that it will shift. And, we can sit here and think, why do we have to go through this? Like, why can't things just move forward? And I think we don't get to when there's something still up in the air, when we don't have enough information, or when something else needs to fall into place first before we can actually have the way forward we are meant to have. And sometimes it's just because we need to pay attention to other things that are happening now. And that is what I'm trying to do. I have a few friends who are, going through big life changes, and they've kind of swung in that pendulum where it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And then, oh no, actually total reverse of plans. We're going to go this direction. And the one thing that I find interesting is every single time I chat with somebody who's redecided, and you're like, yeah, what do you think? And they're like, oh my God, I'm so relieved. And I think sometimes that's the green light that we're actually waiting for, is like we can pursue one path, but the green light moment is actually when you're like, this is right. This is going to carry me forward. This is filled with relief. Relief is a huge indicator for us. I mean, all of our feelings are huge indicators, and you're not going to feel relief 100% of the time. That's for sure. Because you're going to go through things that test you, and like, you're going to be challenged. But when you do find those moments of like, like I definitely felt a little bit of relief when I woke up on Sunday and there was actually snow. For some reason, I was like, okay, I am in the right place, assuming the right things. I did plan my weekend the right way. Anyway, obviously I have some letting go to do today. Anyway, we're going to dive into today's astro check-in, just a little picture at what's happening astrologically that you can consider, keep in mind this week. And we have a really cool week ahead of us because it's the spring equinox on Saturday, which of course also marks the first day of spring and is astrologically when the sun moves from Pisces into Aries. And what I like about that part is that Aries is the beginning of a new astrological year. So there's a lot of leadership energy with Aries. There's a lot of new beginning energy. It's a fire sign. So there's tons of motivation, momentum, that energy to get going. It's huge with Aries. And you need that in spring, right? Because everything that has been so slow and dormant and cold and dead is actually there's going to be new life that emerges. And that doesn't happen, by just sitting back in a chill water sign of Pisces, right? It takes something totally new, which was why we have Aries. And so the question becomes, what can we do this week to really make this a moment for ourselves? Well, a lot of people during equinoxes or on solstices, they like to do sun salutations. If you're a yogi, you know what that is. There's other ways, I think, to really appreciate this movement into spring. And if you know me well, you know that the first thing I'm going to suggest is actually spring cleaning. This is just one of the most powerful tools we can do for ourselves, because when we take action to clean something, to put work into renewing it, when we put work into letting go of the parts that either if we have a bunch of stuff that is sitting, getting dusty, or it's not serving us anymore, if we put effort into letting that go intentionally and getting it out of our space, a lot of new energy can flood in. And that's what I love about, spring cleaning. I say that with quotes. Of course, it takes a lot of energy, which hopefully once we kind of get into Sun and Aries and other planets moving into Aries as well, you'll maybe feel a little bit of that momentum. I definitely have not been feeling that very much. Just Pisces energy has been strong, and Pisces could not be more different from Aries in terms of how it moves, how it holds energy. It's much slower. It is much more spiritual. It's very watery and also heady, like not in the same way that air signs are, but anyway, I digress. The point is that doing some spring cleaning or purging some things, investing in new things that are going to make your home or life experience work better. This is a really good time for that, right during this start to spring. Also, this is a great time to connect to nature. So if you're feeling like you've been a little bit down lately, or you're feeling not very motivated, a really fast way to fast track that is going to be go outside on a walk. And of course, right now we're still going to be seeing the lasting effects of winter, but before you know it, when you go on that walk, you're going to be seeing some tree buds, and then you're going to see the patch of grass that you usually walk by is starting to turn green, and then you're going to be noticing more birds, and then before you know it, it's going to be looking like summer's here, maybe even some flowers and things like that. So take that time starting now. Don't wait until it's so apparent. Join the magic of this season by really getting out and observing what's happening now and being a part of that process of everything coming to life, and notice how that mirrors in your own energy. Those are probably my two encouragements this year for this spring equinox. And of course, all you have to do to make it special is make it your own. Like take 5 minutes or an hour or an entire day and dedicate yourself to celebrating this moment and crossing this threshold of moving. Literally, if you think about it, we're moving from before that day, we had more darkness than light. And after that day, we're going to be feeling that, more light than darkness. So we're moving into the light. So have that moment of celebration, especially because we all know that we could use a little bit more of that light, both physically and internally, than we have felt in a while, right? I'm not alone in feeling like it's been just like the most long winter ever. Okay, so I wanted to take just a little bit of time to touch on this blog post that I recently posted on the A Bit From Within website called "What Actually Helps with Panic Attacks." And this was a article that I wrote. It has some affiliate links in it to some of the things that I'm going to discuss. But essentially, I remember when I was going through really bad panic attacks, not really having a good idea of tangible tools that could help me. And I remember during that time, I was feeling very much just this longing for anything that could work, like this magic button. And I think it was really hard because, especially working with a lot of like Western medicine healthcare providers, you just don't know what kind of response you're going to get from them. And so I didn't go to my primary care physician with mine for a couple of months. And after I did, I happen to have a lovely, lovely primary care physician, and she's amazing. And she did give me some great suggestions that really did help me. But I also know some people who have been either ignored or invalidated or told to just go on to an antidepressant, which maybe that is the right thing. I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong with that. But I also know that sometimes people would prefer to have more options than they're given. And so I definitely don't have all the answers. I only can speak from my own experience. And that's why I wrote the blog that I did, because I honestly have had more than a couple friends come to me lately talking about how they've been having panic attacks. And they're not talking to me from the sense of like they want advice from me. They're more just sharing what they're going through, or what I know is just a very small window into what they're going through. Because when you are living with anxiety attacks or panic attacks, it's because there's some big shit going on in your life. And, just because somebody's going through that doesn't mean that that's bad stuff. I mean, obviously, sometimes you're going through really hard times and you are in that place. And I know that some of us struggle with that when there's doesn't seem to be a lot going on. But I know in my own experience and in some of the patterns I've seen with others, sometimes panic attacks actually come up when there's good changes coming into your life or when you're close to getting what you wanted. For me, my first real set of panic attacks happened right after we closed on our house or signed a contract on our house. And that was such a huge portal in my life, this thing that I could never imagine finally getting, something I was so excited for, something I had longed for, something that meant so much to me. And then here I was, you get that, and now you're dealing with all of this anxiety and panic. And so I just want to share today from my own perspective. You guys know I'm not a physician or a doctor or medically certified to tell you what to do about any of this, but I have lived it myself, and I can share with you things that I found to be true for me, and you can take this and do your own research or let it, spring forth a path that you hadn't thought of before. And hopefully it just, if anything, my hope is that it just normalizes what you're going through so that you just don't feel so alone in what you're going through, because I know from having been through it myself that when you're dealing with this on an everyday basis, it is so lonely, and it is really hard for the people who are closest to you to be full of compassion and to understand. I remember that when I was dealing with a really bad series of real panic attacks, I had bravely, any interaction out in the world felt extremely brave to me. I was being the most courageous I had ever been. And I met up with my cousin, and we were just talking about, I can't even remember right now because I've kind of blacked it out a little bit. But we had been sitting there talking for, 30, 45 minutes or so. And she had brought up something something like some sort of medical condition. And at the time, like a really big trigger for my anxiety was like anything that had to do with like blood or passing out or just an ambulance. Like all of these things were like really big triggers for me. And so she obviously didn't know. And I had to get out of there. I was like immediately like, I think I felt like my face drain white, and I started to like, my heart was racing. And another thing that people don't talk about, but that I did do some research on, and there's research out there, is that sometimes when you have a panic attack, it also makes like your bowels start moving. So then you have that on top of it, and there's a huge sense of urgency there. And I was just like, I have to get out of here. I don't even remember if I gave her an excuse or if I was just like, I'm having a panic attack, I've got to go. Or I'm sure it was not that straightforward. I can be straightforward, but I'm not usually that on the nose. Especially because at that time it was so personal and so scary, and I wasn't as open talking about it. I couldn't even get those words out of my mouth exactly, other than like, I'm not okay. And so I remember I had to cut that short, and I just left, and I felt so bad. I mean, obviously I'm still carrying this memory with me just because I felt ashamed of the fact that like I couldn't even stay there in that conversation. And that wasn't the only time that I had to remove myself. It felt like for a couple of months in a row, like my first panic attack happened in February, and I think it wasn't until like May that I really remember this starting to slow down a little bit. But I had a moment where we were doing a bridal show for the photography business, and I had made it through most of the day. I think the whole show was like 5 hours, and this was about 4 hours in, and I was hanging in there. I was managing, I was breathing, I was functional. And I think all I was trying to do was like just stay focused on each couple, stay focused on each wedding, like just take it one client at a time. And this really great couple came up to us, and we're talking about different pictures, and we were just hitting it off or whatever. And then the guy, I mean, he had no idea, but he started sharing this story that was extremely triggering for my anxiety. And I mean, again, all of those same things, turned white, heart started racing. My eyes got super big, and I looked at Dave, and I was just like, excuse me. And I bolted out of there like as fast as I could, because I didn't want to have an incident in public, especially at a venue that big. And I went outside and I called my mom, and my mom was extremely helpful when I was going through my series of panic attacks. And while I wish that she could help everybody the way that she helps me, I do think that having somebody in your life who has some idea of what you're going through, so maybe you do have the resources that your close inner circle is, that, maybe it's a mom or a sister or your partner or whatever, or whoever is close. But if you don't have that, maybe you start to, I don't know the right word. I was going to say shop around, but like that sounds bad. But, see if there's anybody in your outer circle, a close friend that you do connect with who has been through it, and you can kind of just have a buddy. That I didn't list that as a resource on the blog, but I definitely feel like it was very helpful for me to have kind of like that lifeline of just being able to call my mom during those moments when it was really bad. And for me, when I did connect with my mom, especially during those times, it was just in very quick, brief phone calls. So it's not like we sat on the phone forever, like going through what was happening or whatever, because the more I talked about it, the more anxiety that came up for me. So it would kind of just be like, you're okay. You're fine. Like, just, look at the sky. Let's talk about something else. Let me tell you a story about the dogs, just something. She knew where I was at, and she also was able to give me that moment of like a distraction while I started to calm down. And what I what I wish I would have known when I was going through these series of these experiences, when it was manifesting as like having to get out of these situations, or every once in a while where there was a situation I'd have to go through where, I couldn't leave. Like when I was teaching a yoga class or when I was in the middle of a wedding consultation, with clients or something like that. You can't just get up and leave. But what I wish I would have known then when I was going through these series where the panic was so real and so visceral, and where I was having these literal fight or flight moments where you could see me literally flying out of these situations that weren't even dangerous, but I was having that reaction, is I wish I knew more about what was happening in my nervous system. And essentially, my sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the system that is on red alert, it is looking for danger, it is sending all of the messages from the brain to the rest of the body that you are in danger, was in overdrive. It felt like everything was a threat. And the counterbalance to that part of my nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system, was not able to function. Like, it was not getting back on board. It wasn't calming down. It wasn't restoring my systems. It wasn't letting me know when it was safe to calm down. And so how do you fix that? That's, I think, the first key, and what I wish that I would have done more of in the beginning. And I do think that part of the reason that I didn't do much of it is because it didn't feel natural. Like, I would get home from these panic attacks and I would just like lay in the bed or lay on the couch and just feel like I was, even though I was quote unquote like resting, I didn't feel like I was resting at all. And it wasn't until almost a year later that I took a course for my yoga teacher training in restorative and yin yoga. And I learned a ton in that class about the ways that especially restorative yoga can actually engage your parasympathetic nervous system in a way that you can't just get by just resting on a couch or just resting in your bed. So I wish I would have been doing some restorative yoga. I wish that I would have just taken, probably morning and night, just laid in Shavasana with a big bolster under my knees, maybe a weighted blanket on top of me, an eye bag. You have to almost make it a little bit bougie, but the part of the reason is because your body needs to be met with the most amount of comfort and grounding. The weighted blanket helps with the grounding. The eye pillow helps with grounding. And just taking, at the beginning, I probably needed like 20, 30 minutes each little session, just to ground and calm down my nervous system, to let the parasympathetic nervous system remember what it was like to turn on. And I'm obviously not talking about it in a medical terms. There's way better ways of explaining this, but I'm just trying to put it into easy to understand terms. So I think the thing that is hard about that is when you are really panicked, it can feel really uncomfortable to slow down in that way. And your body needs the chance to really bring the heart rate down. It needs opportunities to bring that parasympathetic nervous system on board. It needs you to sit and breathe. It needs you to be calm and quiet. It needs that. But it doesn't feel natural, because when you've got, all of this cortisol running through your system and you are on alert, your body is essentially saying, like, let's stay watching for any threat. Let's stay engaged. Let's keep on alert. And it's not good for you. So you have to maybe just keep that in mind if you are going through this, that it's okay to give yourself those moments of calm and rest. And if you feel like you can't, slow down in that way, see if you have a friend who can help you out. Like, maybe your partner can just, like, as you lay down, like, take a few fingers and like rub up and down from like the center of your brow up to your hairline and back down. Hand massages, going to get a massage, all super, super grounding. I will say that by the time I went to my physician, she recommended 2 tools to me that really did help. And I did not get put on an antidepressant or anything at that point. It was something we did discuss in our conversation as an option, but it was something that I wanted to hold off on potentially if I could try something different. Just that's where I was at the time. And so she told me that there's something you can get off the shelves. You can go to Sprouts or Natural Grocers or maybe even the normal grocery store too. But it's called Natural Calm, and it's a magnesium supplement. And I'm gonna link this in my blog below because you can get it also off of Amazon. But Natural Calm is just something. It's a straight up magnesium that you can just put into a little bit of water and drink in. And I will say that a lot of my friends who had been taking Natural Calm were like, oh yeah, I take it before bed. It's super soothing. It gets me into, kind of calm down to be able to fall asleep. For me, when I was going through this and my system was really frazzled, I was actually taking Natural Calm in the mornings because if I got on the anxiety train, then I continued with that all day. So for me, I needed it when I woke up to help me calm down. Because up to that point, I wasn't calm in the morning. It's not like I had a low baseline, like my baseline was high. The other thing that really helped that she suggested to me, and of course, you'll have to get this from your doctor and of course, have the conversation about if this is right for you. But she prescribed to me a drug called propranolol. And essentially what this does is like, if you can take it before your anxiety attack starts, it can block those like messengers that you're going to panic. So it can help stop like the heart starting to race too much, or the like sweats that start to come from anxiety. And if you don't go into those systems, if your body is not like, oh, here we go, here goes the heart race, here goes the color draining out of your face, here comes all of the body signals that you're about to have an anxiety attack, then you can stay out of that place for longer. Because for me, I was really in this vicious cycle where as soon as those symptoms started, I felt like it was such a quick spiral out of control. And what I really loved about it is it's not something that I had to take every day. It was something that I could, okay, I'm going into this, like I said at the beginning, like it felt like anytime I had to go out into public, I was being very brave. So if I knew like going into the grocery store was going to be really tricky at first, or honestly, like teaching yoga was really nerve-wracking for a while because I was so afraid I would have an anxiety attack in front of my students, and I just didn't want to bring in that energy. And so once I had this as a resource, I probably for a couple weeks just took it, a little bit before a yoga class, and it really helped. And honestly, like I never even, for me personally, I'm describing like what I went through, I felt like was pretty intense. But I never even went through like my whole bottle of propranolol. Like I really only used it as needed, and it really, really helped. And it didn't take, it's not like I became like dependent on it or anything like that. It just helped me re-find my confidence that I really was okay, and to retrain my body that I didn't have to be in panic every time I was out in public. So I don't know if that is helpful or not. A couple other of suggestions for like tools that really helped. So, we have like restorative yoga. We have just literally like getting more grounded, the weighted blankets, the Natural Calm, talking to your doctor about like other options of what's actually going to help you with your panic attacks. The other thing that really helped me is there is this article written by, what's her name? Wendy Dryden. She has this article that you can find online called The Breakout from the Vicious Circle of Anxiety. And like I said, sometimes reading more about this like actually made me panic, but then actually understanding the cycle actually really helped me break out of it. And so I what I did is like, I opened a note in my phone. You guys might know I use my notes on my phone a lot for all different kinds of things, anything I need to find quickly. And I wrote myself this like little note full of a couple of things from her article or things that just would remind me. So if I started to get those anxiety signals and I was out in public, I could just pull this up and I would remind myself of what's happening. And essentially, one of the ideas that she talks about in the article is that, anxiety is extremely uncomfortable. It's inconvenient. It's crappy, but it is not the end of the world. And we have to kind of change our mindset, because our anxiety says to us like, yes, this is the end of the world, but it is not actually the end of the world. And in order to overcome the anxiety, we have to tolerate being uncomfortable and inconvenienced, but we have to get ourselves to the place where we can start to face it in a way that we feel empowered. So if you just straight up avoid anything that's going to give you any anxiety, then you're not actually dealing with it and you're not allowing yourself to learn. The other thing that, she had written, I believe this is what I had written, and I think it was inspired from this article. Like, if I panic, then I panic. That's uncomfortable, but it will go as easily as it came. And when I realized that, that was a huge mindset shift for me, because in my mind, it was like, if I panic, that is the end of the world. That is the worst thing that could happen to me. And while I understand that that's not rational, we're not talking about rational thoughts here, right? We all can agree on that. And so surrendering into that, like this idea, like if I do panic, then I face it. It's uncomfortable, but I live through it. And the faster that, that idea of like, it will go again as easily as it came, the more that I started focusing on that, it was like I started to feel a little bit more empowered. That I was like, oh, this doesn't have to be a 5-month saga. If I panic, it could be a quicker thing. It could go as easily as it came. And I started to notice that when I had like something would cause me a little bit of anxiety, and I'd be like, oh, okay. I try to just stay in a place where I'm like, this is happening. I can feel my heart racing a little bit. This is uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I'm going to take a couple breaths and I'm going to just see if this changes. And sure enough, things would start to change a little bit faster. And the final thing that I had to write is kind of where I want to leave today's episode, is that even if you panic or even if you are having an anxiety attack, like, you are still a worthy person. You are brave. You are enough. Even when these things happen, like even when you act like a not perfect human, you are still enough. And for me, I had to write that in that note because I felt so unworthy when this happened to me. I felt like there's something wrong with me, that I am broken, that I am not good enough, that I am not worthy of being a part of this group or being a part of this experience or whatever I was going through at the time. It put me in such a deep place of shame. But that's part of the reason that I wanted to have this episode today, is just to remind anyone out there who is experiencing this or who might experience it in the future. Like, maybe you've had some anxiety, but you've never had to deal with it on this level. Like, none of us are infallible from going through something like this, or like if it ends up happening to you, it doesn't mean that you are cursed or that you did something wrong. This is not our fault. And I know that it feels that way. At least it did for me. I felt like this should be something that I can control, and I can't. And this is terrible. And it really plays into that vicious cycle. And so I just want to be that voice that reminds you, like, if you've ever gone through this, if you're ever going to, just remember me saying this, like, you are enough and this too shall pass. Like, this is not going to be the rest of your life. And even if it becomes a big part of your story, it doesn't mean that you can't manage it and find real ways to help yourself through this. And if you feel like you want to pick my brain a little bit more, you're welcome to shoot me an email. You can email abitfromwithin@FeliciaMarty.com. Or you can go to my website, abitfromwithin.com, and reach out to me there. I mean, I've had some of the people that I connect with already starting to reach back out on this blog and say, like, there's some really good thoughts in here. And I think the biggest takeaway is just knowing you're not alone. Knowing that if you're facing this stuff, you're not the only one who's had those really dark thoughts or lacked faith in themselves. And you can find it again. I know it. I believe it. And it might be a journey, and one that I hope that you can open your heart up to. And I know how daunting it is and how unfair it feels. It's not easy to be in that position. So it is my sincerest hope that this was valuable and helpful. And if you do have a chance to leave a review on this episode, I would absolutely love it, or a review on the podcast, of course. If you are interested in more material from me, you can always check out my Instagram, or if you want guided meditations and gentle yoga practices and things that also really help with anxiety, gentle yoga is another good tool. It doesn't exactly do the same things that the restorative yoga will do, but there are plenty of benefits from just taking a moment to breathe, calm down, center yourself, and move your body. So you can check out all of my classes on our Patreon site. If you go to our website, abitfromwithin.com, you can click join now and it'll give you all of the options. We have $6 options, which are mostly for the astrology stuff and the guided meditations. And then the $12 option is for yoga included with that. And then the $18 option is more of a community focus. And of course, a huge appreciation for your monetary support of what I've been creating and putting out there into the world. Okay, so before we leave, let's do a card drawing. I've got the Wild Offerings deck. You know, while I shuffle these cards, I'm going to put out there into the universe, I'm going to get a new deck. I feel like I've been saying this for a little while, but I'm really ready. I've got to figure out which one I want. If anyone has any suggestions, definitely let me know. Okay, so this card is companionship. When you fully bless and embrace your aloneness, you're ready for the ones who are meant to be with you. May I welcome this solitude, knowing it will open the way for all healthy relationships. There's something kind of beautiful about that with the topic that we just went over. I feel like when you talk about panic attacks, we're always talking about how lonely it is. You know, you're the only one experiencing it. You can't bring somebody else into it. They can't be on that exact same level. They can't understand what's happening inside of your head or your body. But I love this idea of like companionship, and this idea that the more that we come to terms with our aloneness or our individuality or accepting ourselves exactly as we are, then we're opening up our hearts for those who are meant to be with us. And, you know, companionship, that's not just about a life partner, right? That's about the community that we carry with us, our family and the people in our life that are our chosen family, and who open us up and care for us and inspire us. And I love that as the conclusion, this card to pull at the end of this episode. Okay, you guys, that's it for me for today. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and know that I'm sending you lots of love, and we'll talk to you again next week.